I am Shaji John from Alpha Micro Visual Media. In this session, we plan to discuss about art. As we know, film actor is an artist. So we should know about art. Art is first of all an experience. It may be the experience of creating or the experience of appreciating a work of art. The term artist describes only the person who creates a work of art, although the person who is able to truly appreciate an artistic piece also shares some of the artist's qualities. The terms art and aesthetics are commonly used. Aesthetics refers to the principles of art, whereas the term art can mean the works of art also, and there is hardly any difference in meaning between the adjectives aesthetic and artistic. Art and beauty. Most people try to define art in terms of beauty, but beauty is not a fixed or definite reality. What may be beautiful to one may be ugly to another. For instance, opinions differ on Picasso's paintings. Expression of feelings. Some people define art as the expression of an artist's personal feelings in relation to some object. By this is not mean that these feelings hang loosely in the artist's mind to take shape in his paintings or sculptures. What is meant is that the artist reacts strongly to something, say a landscape, and as a means of expressing his reaction, he starts to paint the scene. As he goes on painting, his feelings become clearer and take shape in the image he produces. A sensitive onlooker is able to recapture some of the sensitive onlooker is able to recapture some of the artist's original feelings by viewing the work. In this way, the viewer and the artist are in communication. Next, about perfection of form. There are also some who told that the essence of art lies in the creation of a perfect form. There is of course much truth in this. Quite often the artist works under the sheer impulse to create a form both perfect and beautiful, without any thought of communication and in mind. Such artists are usually accused of formalism, that is, of being busy with mere abstract ideas and forms and not with reality, and therefore of doing something useless. This is not a fair criticism, for the creation of material forms is certainly worthwhile and even exciting. But at times, of violent social appeal, those who usher changes accept artists to take an immediate and active part in their cycle. In creating a work of art, the artist intimates nature. Every artist piece is in some way, therefore, drawn from nature. There is considerable controversy about the relationship between the artifact and the object of art, which it is an imitation. To what extent should there be an imitation? Should it be a flat reproduction of the object, like a certain photographs? Should, for instance, a film be a slice of life? These are difficult questions, even granting that imitation is really too essential to art. There still remains the fact that there are different ways in which art can imitate nature. The question now is, which is the better imitation of nature? Summing up, in order to summarize the various aspects of art mentioned so far, it could be said that art is an activity whereby the artist creates a form which has some relation or reference to the world or to a part of it. A piece of art is a form which is both made up of and communicated by the material used by the artist. This form is organic. It has all the parts that are necessary but nothing superfluous. And all the parts are perfectly interrelated. Organic structure is an important feature which through art shares with nature. One author has described a literature, the art of words, as relevant fiction. The same could be said of all art forms. For all art is fiction, not really itself, not reality itself, but all art has affiliations with the realities. All art represents, along with the artist's own emotions, something of the world of reality, something of nature. So the works of art, like life itself, does not need to have an external point of reference. In other words, painting or sculpture does not have to resemble a particular object or to offer some message to say something other than itself. By the very fact of its existence, as an art work speaks and is significant. As such, all art is in one way or another relevant. But art cannot be assessed in terms of commitment. Commitment is a quality which can be used of the artist or of his public, but not of his at work. Art as communication. For the purpose of communication, men have invented a whole system of symbols. In fact, symbol making is one of the primary creative acts of man. A whole system of communication sprang from the earliest drawings and paintings. The alphabet and all written languages are the outcome of these images. The visual and musical arts have worked out means of communication that go beyond the scope of mere words. The painter and the composer thus have an invented symbols which can be handed down the edges so that concepts and feelings can be conveyed directly. So how the photographer and the filmmaker. Art as a medium of communication has much to offer to the life and progress of man. At a time when the development and the very survival of man depends on the comprehensive and successful intercultural communication, one cannot afford to overlook the possibilities of any form of communication. The artistic or aesthetic communication therefore is essential for the total life of any person. Next, social function of art. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community or to enjoy the arts. This is required by a human person in order to develop fully. And some believe that the arts have no constructive role to play in the modern world. Concerned with this attitude, the arts embodies the human spirit and serve the human objective in various ways. Discovery. Life is like a multicolored prism. It has many facets, many angles to view it from. One of the joys of man is to experience these varying facets of life. By these creations, the artist enables his fellow men to share the joys of his discoveries. Today, responsiveness to the simple joys of living. Today, responsiveness to the simple joys of living is suffocated by the hostile and bustle of competitive world. By the impersonality of mass production, by the love of cheap sensationalism, by the sexualization of life, and by the lack of leisure. The arts enriches the total perception. For example, the story Postmaster by Rabindranath Tagore was made into a film by another artist, Satyajit Ray. However, Mr. Ray changed the end of the story. His explanation for doing so was at the end of the original story, the postmaster is supposed to leave, and the little servant girl falls at his feet and says, "Please don't leave me alone. Take me with you." This struck me as a being sentimental. I could not express that because it was an emotion I don't feel. Being a man of this 20th century, being brought up in certain surroundings, being exposed to certain influences, I made ending of the story more dry and moving in its own way. I made it into the opposite of what it was. The girl in the film hides her grief instead of displaying it. She ignores the postmaster. She is so hurt that she does not even want to tell this man that she is unhappy. You see her weeping by the well from which she is drawing water, but the moment he calls her, she wipes her tears. She walks past him crying the bucket of water and ignores the money he was going to offer her. That was my interpretation as the 20th century artist working in 1960. The purest object of these changes, well, I made them because I am an artist with my own feelings. I was using Tagore's rendering of the story as a basis, and this was my interpretation of it. Reformation. By imposing a new form to raw material, the artist adapts it, like for instance by taking a lump of clay and forming it into a vase. The artist starts with a shapeless block of marble and ends up with a human figure, or he seizes upon a series of scattered events and molds them into a film. The artist is a man who recreates the world of his own image to the image of his own aspirations. He keeps alive a sound optimism in man, a confidence that he can change the world for the better. Man's intellect, by its very nature, seeks and creates order. Order may be defined as the interrelation between the parts of a whole. Nature has an order of its own. The scientist is a man who discovers the laws behind this order and defines them. The artist, however, takes up the order of nature and enhances it by recreating it. This he does not only with the regard to material elements but also in the flow of his thoughts and emotions. In giving order to these, he lends order to himself. Thus, he discovers his right place in a world of men, animals, and things. Integration. Man has a wide variety of experiences which at times remain unrelated. One probably has seen people acting in one way under one set of circumstances and quite differently in others. Life thus becomes compartmentalized. At worst, one develops what is known as a split personality. The artist unifies and integrates the experience of man. He helps his fellow men by sharing his art with them to coming to terms with the complexity that the life is and grow greater than what their individual experiences amount to. Communion. The artist rises above the barriers of language and nation when he expresses himself in all sincerity and earnestness. What he says about life, death, love, joy, and suffering accords a universal significance. God speaks of experiences that are familiar to all. Thus, it develops his phenomenon to acknowledge one another as brothers sharing the same human existence. For instance, Satyajit Ray's Abarajito has gone a long way to make a Europeans and Americans understood and love India. At the same time, foreign audiences recognizes something of themselves in the characters of Apu, Harihar, and Sarbogia. Siegfried Krogweiser wrote about a scene from this film. The camera focuses on the ornamental bark of an old tree and then slowly tilts down to the face of Apu's sick mother who yearns for her son in the big city. In the distance, the train is passing by. The mother walks heavily back to the house, where she imagines she hears Apu's shot. No, is he returning to her? She gets up and looks into the empty night, aglow with water reflections and dancing below the waves. India is in this episode, but not only India. What seems to be the remarkable about Barajito, a reader of the New York Times writes to the editor of the film section, is that you see this story happening in a remote land and see these faces with their exotic beauty and still feel that the same thing is happening every day somewhere in Manhattan or Brooklyn or the Bronx. Had Mr. Satyajit Ray tried to be an all India artist or an international artist, he might not have reached this intense communion with the people of other cultures. The true artist attains universality to the extent that he is loyal to his particular milieu, for it is in the depth of his own particular situation that he can reach the universal ground common to people of different places and times. The role of the arts in society. While discussing about the role of the artist in society, two groups of attitude can be easily be observed. Some believe that an artist is a privileged being endowed with a genius that sets him in a class of his own amidst his contemporaries. According to this view, the artist is more sensitive than other people. He gains unique insight into human life and he has an exclusively ability to express this insight in his artwork. Another view is that an artist's function is not primarily to express his own individual insights but to express the collective aspiration of his society. This view is inimical to giving the artist a role which sets him apart from his fellow workers and intellectuals. It also objects to the transformation of artistic activities into a sort of esoteric religion for some imitated few. For if the urgent duty of every man is to make himself the neighbor of all others, how can the artist accept to being to a privileged group still? In the last few centuries, a certain cultural aristocracy has developed which is now being replaced by a so-called mass culture. A mass culture is the milieu of a popular art, pop art. It may be that the artist, as he has known so far, utilizes means of expressions that constitute a discipline or even a kind of mystic denied to the mass audience. On the other hand, there spontaneously develops in a mass culture a typic of music, dance and symbols accessible to anyone belonging to that culture. There is yet another factor involved in defining the role for the artist, the emergence of cultural industries, television, cinema, show business, advertising. The film industry, for instance, hires the talents, inspiration, and skill of the scriptwriters, cinema editors, craftsmen, actors, musicians, and designers. Genius, inspiration, and invention are, are required more than ever nowadays in cinema. All geniuses are welcome. Edges are all equal, but genius is all about edge. This is about art and its basis. Kindly not important points in this session. This is Shaji John signing off from Alpha Omega Visual Media. Thank you.